Joining me now, first class father, Tim Sheehy. Welcome to First Class Fatherhood.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
It's an honor to have you here. Let's start like this. How many kids do you have? How old are they?
I got four kids, 4, 6, 8, and 10, two boys and two girls.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I got four kids. We had three boys, then got the girl on our fourth try. Otherwise, we'd have five by now. But we got her, and that's the name of that tune. So, if you could, Tim, please take a second to hit my listeners with a little bit about your background and what you do.
Absolutely. Tim Sheehy. I was a U.S. Navy SEAL officer and team leader, did several deployments overseas. My wife was a Marine. We met in the service. Both of us were combat veterans. Loved the military, loved leading my team around the world. About 200 missions all over the place, primarily Iraq and Afghanistan, but also South America and elsewhere. And it was an honor of my life to lead Americans on the field of battle. Ended up getting wounded, and medically that spelled the end of my career. So my wife and I decided no time like the present. We had an idea for a business, so we started our businesses here in Montana. And the focus was taking the close air support model that we'd used in combat of enhanced aerial surveillance and technologies that supported my teams on the ground and applying it to non-military tasks. And that's created our firefighting company, Bridger Aerospace. And we're one of the largest aerial firefighting companies in the world. So we literally fight wildfires from the air. Planes that drop the water on the fire. We do the infrared mapping, the surveillance and management of wildfires from the air. It's an amazing mission. We've created a few hundred jobs, and we're incredibly proud of our business and what it's meant for the veteran community in the state. We're all veteran founding team. And it's been a wonderful journey for the last 9 years, creating jobs, and especially creating jobs in such an important mission like public safety, fighting fires. And just earlier this year, we decided, given the political landscape in this country and what's going on, it's time for a new generation of leaders to step up and try to return common sense and truth to our government. So we're now running for the U.S. Senate. I say we because it is a team effort. My wife and I, my kids, it's a huge commitment. But we're running for the U.S. Senate for the 2024 Senate race here, and hopefully return some common sense to America's congressional bodies.
Yeah, I'm going to circle back to your Senate race in just a second here. And thank you and your wife for your service. And so take me back then 10 years ago. I think you said your oldest was 10. How old were you when you first became a dad? Where were you at in your career, and how did becoming a father kind of change your perspective on life?
Well, it changes everything, as you know, as most parents know. It's stepping through the looking glass. Your perspective on everything just transforms. And I remember the day for me, it really transformed. Actually, I was still a Navy SEAL officer. So we had just had our first child. My wife and I, at that point, we'd just been transferred to Hawaii. So we were, my wife was a Marine. I was a SEAL at the time. We were both in Hawaii, and we had our first child, our oldest daughter, Annabelle, who just turned 10 a few weeks ago. And, it forces you to reevaluate everything about your life, because now you're not just thinking about the impact of what you do and who you are, but everything now is through the eyes of what will this do for my child? How will my child view this? What impact will this have on my child in 10 years? And if I'm in any sort of function, whether it's military or government or business, what will the actions I'm taking now, how will they impact the world that my child will inherit? So it really puts your brain into a different gear and a different perspective. And I remember for me, I was jumping out of a plane over the Pacific Ocean. We were doing a parachute jump over the open ocean, where we'd push boats out of the back of a plane, then we'd jump out and free fall parachute after the boats. And the drill was to be able to deploy a SEAL team and boats quickly into a maritime environment. And, obviously there are rules, and then there's how you really do things within your SEAL team. And oftentimes there was this kind of, competition of, who would open their parachute lower, because, the whoever opened lower landed first on the ground. So it was kind of a race, who can get to the ground first, because the sooner open you shoot, obviously you float down slower. So you want to fall as long as you can and open as low as you can and win. And, I was determined to win that jump. And I remembered coming down and I did. I pulled my chute last, and it opened, and I landed. I remember when I hit the water, and I said, man, that was really stupid. Like, I'm a father now, and I'm out here playing stupid games, macho games that all of us in our 20s play, for no reason other than just because I wanted to be the tough guy, and realizing that, your mind moves so fast in those moments, whether you're in combat, whether you're in a car accident, plane crash, whatever traumatic event you may be in, so much happens. The processor in your brain moves 1,000 times faster in those moments of extreme adrenaline. And I remember, as I was hitting the water, it went through my mind, man, you can't do stuff like that anymore. You got a baby. You got a baby child that's expecting you. You can never replace a child's father. It sounds terrible, but as a parent, you can have another child. as a husband or a wife, you can get remarried. But being a father and a mother are two irreplaceable roles in someone's life. And it made me realize that pretty quick.
Yeah, wow, really well said, Tim. And I often, I mean, there's one of the many reasons why I respect so many of the men and women that serve in the military, especially the ones that have kids, because I can't even imagine. Like I work, sometimes I'll pick up a shift overnight, overtime on the railroad, and I'm away from the kids 16 hours or whatever it is, and that drives me nuts. Thank God we have the FaceTime and stuff now to check in, but to be deployed overseas for months with your life on the line, like I can't even begin to comprehend what that has to be like as a father and or as a mother, and have to be deployed that way away from your child. Was at what point, how old were your kids when you were medically retired? From what stage were you at in your journey there as a father when you came out of the military? And your wife, was she still serving as well?
Yeah, we both served together, and then about a year into our daughter was a year old when we both got out. I'd been injured for the final time. I'd been wounded with some shrapnel, been shot, traumatic brain injury from IEDs, and then a number of it's a tough that job takes a toll on your body. So finally, they said, "Hey, you're at the end of the road. You've got shrapnel in you, you got bullet in you, you've had head injury. You're out of here." And it was a big shift for us. We planned to do careers in the military, but yeah. So she was 1 year old at the time. And then, of course, like any dumb 28, 29-year-old couple, we're like, hey, why don't we just go start a business from scratch, right? That makes sense. And I mean, looking back now, if I had to give myself advice, I'd be like, are you crazy? No, go get a real job, dude. But we did. We took all of our savings. We bought our farm here in Montana, and then we started our business with everything we had. And I mean, it was all risk on. We were totally risk on. And looking back, again, I realized how crazy it was at the time, though. We didn't know any better. We're like, hey, we're going to make this happen. And obviously, thank God, through hard work and some wonderful blessings, the business has thrived. We are where we are now. But that transition was tough for sure. And growing a family too, we were living in our barn for 4.5 years, about 700 square foot living area there. We had all of our kids there. So by the end, 6 people living in a 700 square foot, barn loft. It was, it was pretty tight. We at that point we could afford building our house, so we built our house on the farm there. But that transition again, I look back doing it with our children was so important, because I think had I not had children, I would have made some different decisions. And we knew that we wanted to raise our children in an environment where they were connected to the land. On our farm, they were connected to their faith, and they were very involved in our lifestyle. We homeschool our kids and have since the beginning, and we wanted to be a part of that education process. And looking back, those decisions we made were all made through the lens of fatherhood. They weren't made through a business lens. They weren't made through a career lens. If we wanted to do what's best for our careers, we would have gotten some corporate jobs that were high paying. Instead, we said, we don't really care about the pay. We'd rather live our life according to our values. And if that means more risk and less money, that's fine. But we're willing to trade that for what we want the lifestyle for our children to be.
And just to your point, Tim, one of the reasons why, I never understood, I as a civilian, never wanted to be a military guy, never had any interest. And one of the main reasons is I could never imagine that philosophy of putting somebody ahead of yourself, or service before self mentality. Like I never understood that until I became a father. And then I understood that kind of mentality of putting somebody's livelihood ahead of your own. I started to get that a little bit. I know you guys get it built into you that serve, and grateful for it. But I never really understood that concept until I became a father. And so what would you consider then, Tim? I know you talk about your faith a little bit too. What would you consider to be the top values that you hope to instill in all your kids growing up?
Number one, service, just like you said, servant leadership. We tell our kids from the time they can understand, you will serve as part of this family. You'll join the military. You'll be a firefighter. You'll be a police officer. You'll be a nurse. You can work charity. You can be a wildland firefighter. Whatever it is, but you will be of service. If you carry the Sheehy name, you will be of service at some point. It doesn't have to be your whole life. You don't have to do 30 years in the Army, but at some point you will understand what it means, as you just said, to put others' well-being and others' lives ahead of your own. And really, that's at the root of service. Putting on a uniform and saying, I'm going to put myself in harm's way so that you can be safe. I'm going to run into those Twin Towers so you can run out. I'm going to go to Iraq so you don't have to. I'm going to go out and carry a Pulaski tool and fight that wildfire to protect our community so that you're safe. So right off the bat, service and servant leadership. Second is leave everything better than you found it. Work very hard to leave whatever you have better than you found it. The land, your room, your community, your company if you work there. And, it's gotten to the point just yesterday, we were out, just snowed here, but we were out going to check on the horses. And, my 6-year-old, he's obsessed with leaving everything better than you found it. If he ever sees anything, trash, a bottle cap on the ground, he picks it up and puts it in his pocket to take back and put in the trash can. And yesterday, even though it was, he didn't have any gloves on, there was 6 inches of snow on the ground. He saw, somehow a piece of paper had blown off the road and it was stuck under a juniper tree. And he kind of crawled over their hands in the snow and grabbed this piece of garbage and stuck it in his pocket and said, "No, Dad, we got to pick up the litter. Got to leave things better, right?" I said, "Exactly." So, we really try to inculcate that into that. And then, of course, the golden rule: treat others like you want to be treated. You don't have to be give everyone everything you have all the time, but don't treat anyone else different than you would rather be treated yourself. And trying that from a really early stage. And of course, as as a father and as mothers, you can say whatever you want, but at the end of the day, the kids really look at what you do. And from an early age, they mirror everything you do. And what you say is fine, but what you do is far more important. And they emulate that way earlier in their life cycle than they do what you tell them. And I learned that the hard way once. I was at kind of a work party with some folks, and we were smoking some cigars and doing our thing. And a couple days later, at the time, my 1.5-year-old son, grabbed a stick, and he had a stick in his mouth like a cigar. And I mean, he's seen me smoke cigar once in his little life, because I don't do it very often. But all he had to do was see me do it once, and all of a sudden he was doing the same. So just, lead by example, which, as you alluded to, these are lessons we learn in the military, but they apply so well to fatherhood.
Yeah, and one of the things I talk about a lot on this show, Tim, is the fatherless crisis that we have going on in our country. So many kids growing up without a father or father figure, and it really has a devastating impact. And one of the reasons why that's so important is the discipline aspect that comes from a father. And I definitely discipline my sons a little bit differently than I discipline my daughter. Thank God my wife balances that out a little bit for us. But what kind of disciplinarian would you say? I mean, obviously, as a Navy SEAL, you're a well-disciplined person yourself. But what kind of are you a spanker, timeout guy? What kind of disciplinarian are you as a dad? And is that different than the discipline style you grew up with?
I was blessed to have an amazing, strong, intact mom and dad growing up. I know it's a lot harder for kids who had broken families or, had to go between mom and dad's house or didn't have a father, as you said, because that absolutely is a trend we're seeing. And it's so deeply disturbing. But, you have to set boundaries. You got to reward good behavior, punish bad. That's simple. And it's got to be clear what good behavior is. And absolutely spank if needed. And the key, though, is to not overuse it, because if you start spanking for everything, it starts to lose its meaning. I probably spanked each of my kids. I can count on one hand the amount of times I've done each, but when it happens, they know. And for example, one was my oldest daughter when she was about 3, started to run into the street, and I caught her. I mean, she would have gotten creamed by a van driving by, and I grabbed her just before she ran in the street, and I spanked the daylights out of her, because I said she had to know that, listen, you see pavement, you stop, and you wait for us to go with you. And to this day, she still stops at the edge of that curve at 10 years old, and she doesn't move until either we're with her or she knows what's coming. So it's for their own good. And you have to set those standards early, and you got to hold to them. And then you got to hold yourself to them too. That can be the hardest thing sometimes as a parent, is you're telling your kids to do something, and then, you better not do the opposite, because they have no filter and tell you right away, "Hey, Daddy, you told me I couldn't drink soda. Now you're drinking soda." You're like, "Uh-oh. All right, I'll gently throw that away."
Yeah, that definitely gets more difficult in the teenage years. My oldest is 17. I got a 17, 16, 12, and 9. So it definitely gets more difficult to hold yourself to the fire when you're trying to discipline them, for sure. And you said, now, obviously, you're running for U.S. Senate now. This is a big decision, I know, not just for you, but for your entire family. What was the conversation like for your wife, with your wife, on making this decision? What made you decide to run, and where can the people go to support the campaign?
Yeah, timformt.com. Learn more about our race, about me and my family, and why we're doing this. But, why we decided to get in is, the summer 2021, again, we're an aero firefighting company. We were out flying fires, watching Kabul collapse, watching the disastrous withdrawal, how we abandoned our troops and our allies there. And having fought there, my wife fought there, all of our friends did. Military has become a family business, and it's become a clique business too, where normally, everyone's friends served as well. So within our community, it was such a painful thing to watch our nation's longest war that we fought so hard for collapse in such a disgraceful manner. So that was the first time I started to really look at politics and said, man, I'm a business owner, I'm a father, If this is the kind of behavior we can expect from our government, something's got to change. So got engaged, started donating, hosting events, went to our local congressman at the time, Ryan Zinke, actually pinned my Purple Heart on me back when I was a SEAL. So I'd known him for years, and reached out to him as well as some other politicians and said, listen, get me engaged. I want to help. I'll host events with you guys, fundraisers. I'll speak at events, whatever, I can do to help, because we have to have change. And in that process, got to know a lot of the community, and they pulled me aside earlier this year and said, listen, we have a very important Senate race coming up next year, and we think your message and your candidacy resonates. We'd like you to consider running. And so went back home that day with my wife and said, listen, here's what I've been asked to do. And we talked about getting more involved and making a better future for our kids. This is probably the best chance we're ever going to have to do that. And it was about a 30-second conversation. She said, you have to do it. We have to do it. Just like she was a Marine, I was a SEAL. The country calls you to serve. You don't say, no, thanks. It's not a good time. There's never a good time for anything. I mean, people say, oh, it's a bad time for this. It's a bad time for that. I talk to people who are thinking about having kids, say, well, it's not the right time. And I tell them, my wife and I, we weren't planning. It just happened. He said, there's no perfect time. If you wait for the perfect time to have a child, it's not going to happen. And I think the perfect time for run for Senate, same thing. I don't think there is a perfect time. It's a tough road. You get attacked from all angles. You get turned into a terrible image intentionally by the other side. So there's really no good time to undertake an adventure like this. But, it's a necessary time. America's at a time for choosing right now. We have some really hard decisions to make in the next few years. And I think we need a new generation of leaders to help lead us through this very, very challenging time.
And it's really a blessing to have guys like you get into the fight too, Tim. So many of the Navy SEALs now are getting in the political arena. I think it's good. I think number one, I think it's a blessing that we have access to so many of the Navy SEALs now through podcasts, books, and so much, because you guys have gained so much knowledge and experience, and what it takes when you're going to send people off to war. You guys have lived it. You've lost people there. So I think the people that are making these decisions should actually know what's at stake when they're there. And I know I've had several of them on the podcast here on First Class Fatherhood: Eli Crane, Derek Van Orden, Morgan Luttrell. They've all been on here, all great dads. And so I'm just glad to see that you guys are in the fight, and best of luck to you with the campaign. I'm going to put the link down there in the description below so my listeners can tap it, check it out, and find out more about you. And you alluded to it just there, but the last thing I want to hit you with here, Tim, I love to ask all the dads that I get on the podcast, what type of advice do you have for that brand new dad or for that about to be father who's out there listening?
Cherish every minute, because you don't know what moment you're going to spend with that child that they're going to remember and embody. And just cherish every moment, and remember that how you behave with them, that they emulate everything you say and do. So be very careful about the emotions that you show and the words you use, because they absorb all of it, the good and the bad. So be thoughtful about it and cherish it. It's an amazing ride, and it's the greatest honor of your life is to be a father. And that's why we're doing this. I mean, that's why we're here. One of our campaign slogans is for America's future. We're doing this for America's future. We can't hand our children a nation in such deep distress. Otherwise, they're not going to have the same lives we had. So for America's future, we need a new generation of leaders. And as you alluded to, we're at one of the lowest participation rates in the history of this nation of veterans in Congress. It used to be over 70% in the post-World War II days. Now we're at about 17%. And there's very few people in that building who are resourcing our military and crafting our national strategy that have actually worn the uniform and know what it means to set foot on the field of battle. So we need to send more fathers and more servants to Congress to hopefully return some common sense to this government. And that's why we're doing it, for America's future. TimFromT.com.
Yeah, very well said. I love the message. Again, the link to your campaign is down there in the description below. Tim Sheehy, it's an honor to have you on the show. You're a first-class father all the way, and thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time here on First Class Fatherhood.
Honor to be here. Take care.